test is when?
Appendicular test is Friday, the quiz.
Okay.
So it's another quiz grade. Then the big test is Thursday. But Tuesday will be the test over just the 4.1, 4.4, and 4.5. And then anything in the appendicular and the axial that says it'll be on the chapter test. Like I think where it talked about male and female pelvis differences and the curvatures of the spine. Those will be on there too.
Wait, so we have a test over 4.1 and all of this?
Yes, Tuesday,
Hey, when did we get that? What
a
PowerPoint?
week from today.
Yeah, we got it like last week.
That PowerPoint?
I think so. Maybe.
I got this appendicular skeleton PowerPoint. I don't even know what that's
Were you here that day I lectured?
for. What was that?
That's what I'm saying. I don't even know what that is.
Because I missed several
It would have
days.
been,
Okay, so this test is Tuesday?
yes. Here you go. You may not have been here that day. My suggestion is 4.1 that's in there is go through the book and read it and take notes on your PowerPoint. And I would suggest you guys do that anyways. I had the other class do that because we didn't get,
Oh, I got this.
Because
I don't
we,
know what's that though.
we didn't even get as far as we did in that on that lecture, and I had them finish out the chapter and write notes, and I think it worked out really well
Do we have a lecture over this?
yesterday.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't know. Oh. Rough.
Okay, so joints. There's two terms or two things that we're going to look at with joints when you're considering joints. One is their direction, okay? And you guys, we've talked, well, maybe not in here, but I know in the past we've learned about the different types of joints. Direction is always determined by structure. So how the joint is made or what it's made of, and then how it moves, how it's allowed to articulate. You'll hear that word articulate, that's just the word movement. That determines how much it moves, is how it's structured or shaped. Okay, the other term is range of motion. We talked about that in health science, I know. I don't think we've gotten to it in the principles yet. But range of motion is actually determined by the soft tissues around it, and plus the structure. The structure allows for range of motion too, but the soft tissues particularly allow for kind of guide how much it can be moved. So the soft tissues around the shoulder, and your hip are probably the most movable joints, specifically the shoulder, and others too. You know, you can only go so far. I feel like Cody probably has like super elastic soft tissue. He's like so flexible, but anyway, so that's one thing that determines that. Okay, but there's three main categories of joints on page 12. Three main categories. Immovable joints, okay, which are called synarthroses. And we know arthro is joint, and syn, you know what that means? Syn and sim mean the same thing usually when you see them in words. It means together.
Okay.
Like symbiosis, living together. You all remember talking about symbiosis? I know we're talking about seventh grade. Like a clownfish and a sea anemone. Symbiotic relationship. Or,
Yeah, I remember that.
or a cow and one of those birds that sit on cows and eat their bugs.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know, symbiotic relationship. They live together.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't learn that biology.
So sim or syn means together. So immovable joint, synarthrosis means the joint is together, right? It's not there's not a whole lot of movement there. Slightly movable joints are called amphiarthroses. And again, just like I said, slightly movable. And then freely movable joints, which are like your typical joints that you think of, your wrists and your elbows and your neck. These are called diarthroses. And dia means complete. Kind of like makes you think of complete movement.
What is your immovable joints?
Okay, we're about to go on this. So most of your immovable and slightly movable joints, so your synarthrotic and amphiarthrotic, are going to be axial related, and the rest of them are going to be appendicular related, but that's not always the case, but for the most part. All right, so 2 types of immovable joints. The first one is sutures. Okay, and your sutures particularly are found on the skull, okay, and that's between all those skull bones. Do it.
The top of the coronal suture.
Yeah, it has to do with direction. Wait, coronal would be this way. Sorry. And then sagittal would go this way. Or parietal and parietal suture. But those are the sutures. Okay, now babies still have a really thick fibrous tissue between all those. Okay, it doesn't move, like it says, very, very limited movement, if any. Now adults, they're not going to move at all. They're fused. Okay, but up until adulthood, they're actually still a fibrous joint. So now they don't move. It gets more and more, gets replaced by bone at adulthood, basically. So it turns into bone at that point.
You mean adulthood by older than me? Older.
Probably, yeah, I would say when you quit growing.
Oh.
That's what I would say. Yeah. Which makes sense because, you know, even though like Micah's skull is about to fuse, he's almost 18 months and his little fontanelles are going away. It's still going to keep growing. I mean, his head's not going to stay the same size it is now. So it's still going to have movement, growth movement. So anyway, it's still allowable there. So those are sutures. Okay, syndesmoses. There's 2 examples of this. First one is the coracoacromial. The other one is the tibiofibular. So you'll look for words in here. Acromial is in there. Do you remember what the acromion is? It's on your quiz this week. It's this right here. Okay, this is the acromion. Fill it up there. Okay, the edge of your shoulder, part of the scapula. Now, the coracoid process is actually right here. It's the front of the scapula. Okay, right, fill it right down here in the front.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a joint. I don't even think of it as a joint, but anyways, but it's basically like all tendon in between there. It's really thick and that fibrous tendon in between that basically doesn't allow for any movement or very little movement. So that's one. And the other one is the tibiofibular joint. So the joint between tibia and the fibula down here. Okay, they're not made to move. They don't glide or anything. They are, there's very little movement at least. Okay, so that's the other one. And that's one thing, when you're looking at these and you're like, okay, what distal, okay, tells you, it's not talking about this joint, it's talking about this joint. Distal, tibiofibular. That's why we learned all those terms to start with. It's got a couple other examples I found online at least. One of them is the stylohyoid. So goes between, there's a really fibrous tissue that goes between the styloid process and the hyoid bone, which remember is the one that kind of floats on its own. So those are connected. Kind of interesting. Now it said that fibrous joints absorb shock. So all of those we talk about absorb shock, but again, very, 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 very limited movement, if any. All right. Slightly movable joints, so the amphiarthrotic joints. Amphi means both sides. These have very little movement. They do have a little bit, but very little. They're all cartilaginous, so lots of cartilage there. And then they're able to absorb shock better than the others that we talked about already. So synchondroses, what words do you see in there?
Syn, of course, is together.
Chondro.
Is joint. I know it's cartilage.
Cartilage, yeah. Okay, so together with cartilage is really what that means, is held together by cartilage. These are. Specifically hyaline cartilage. Remember that's the real glassy cartilage. Talked about like kind of moments and bones and things. So sternocostal joint would be where? Sternum.
Costal.
Costo is what? The root word.
The edge.
Ribs. Remember ribs cost a lot of money to eat?
Yeah.
Ribs, they cost a lot. So it's talking about the joint between the ribs and the sternum. So obviously it's somewhat movable, or we would be able to do CPR.
Yeah, I can see the
Right. And you gotta be able to breathe, right? When you breathe in, your chest rises, so that's that movement of those joints. Okay. And then epiphyseal plates, we know, are what? What are epiphyseal plates?
So plates.
You know what they are? If you break them, it's not good.
Oh, your growth
Yes,
plates.
those are your growth plates.
Growth plates.
Okay, epiphyseal plates are your growth plates. That's another example. Okay, again, holds the end of the bone together with the diaphysis of the bone. So, okay, and then symphyses. Okay, you probably noticed whenever we're learning the pelvis, the pubic symphysis. Okay, that's an example of this joint. So these are really thin plates of hyaline cartilage again, and they actually separate fibrocartilage. So you find these in the vertebrae too. So hyaline cartilage lines the bones, and then you have fibrocartilage in the middle. So these are an example of symphyses joints, as well as the pubic symphysis in the thigh. So still allows for some little bit of movement. I mean, we need our spine to be able to move, but not a whole lot. There's no gliding, there's no moving around on each other. It just allows, I think the better word maybe is flexibility. It allows for some flexibility instead of true movement, if that makes sense. Maybe a little more sense. All right, freely movable joints. There's 6 types of these, and they pretty much make sense. Diarthroses. These are also called synovial joints, and you need to know that word. The reason they're called synovial joints is because they have a synovial capsule around them that actually holds synovial fluid, and that provides lots of lubrication for those joints so that they can move the way that they need to. Okay, so first type on here are gliding joints. So this would be like your carpals and your tarsals. Those bones move, but they just glide against each other. Okay, it'd be more like this. Okay, so gliding is like you're moving, two flat surfaces. Okay, a hinge joint is only going to move one direction. Okay, your elbows are hinge joints. Your fingers are hinge joints. Knee is a hinge joint, right? It's just like the door, just like a hinge on a door. It only moves in one direction. One part it says it's convex, and the other part's concave. Makes sense. It has very strong ligaments too. That's why it can hyperextend. Okay, a pivot joint is going to be like a twisting type of joint. Your neck would be an example, right? Your atlas and axis, they pivot. Another example is the radial ulnar, like this.
So you can turn it.
Right. Okay. Up here. Those are 2. Condylar joint. These are specific to your fingers and your toes. Okay, so it's not just a hinge joint because your finger doesn't just move this direction; it moves around too. Right? They can move on. You can do them sideways, around in circles. So that's an example of that one. The saddle joint is specific to your thumb. Kind of has a special type in it. It kind of looks like a saddle. Okay, that's why it's called that. So it moves this direction, but it moves this direction too. And then a ball and socket joint. Okay, your shoulder and your hip are both ball and socket joints. And these allow for the most range of motion. These are going to have your highest range of motion, right? Because they can move in circles, can go up, down, forward, backwards.
So I with my shoulder.
Okay, so that is that. It says range of, I'm recording for that. Range of motion depends on the depth of the socket. So that's one thing you notice. The depth of the socket at the hip is much deeper, right, than this one at the shoulder. So the shoulder then has more range of motion. Obviously, your legs don't move across your shoulders.
But you don't want your hips to come out. It's your shoulders. Like if the shoulder goes out because it's done as deeply in.
Right. You usually put it back in.
But they always say hips are hard.
Yeah, they are. They're much. Well, there's just a lot of tissue going on. A lot of times when people fracture their hip, we'll talk about fractures Thursday, but there's so many different places you can fracture your hip. You can fracture the femur. A lot of times people break it right here, and the whole like head of the femur comes off. Sometimes they break the acromion on the inside, not the acromion. That's the shoulder. Anyways, you can break, there's like so many different, you can actually break the pelvis instead of that. So there's lots of different issues. Now it's going to bother me. My mind just went blank. I know this like the back of my hand. And acetabulum. There we go. Okay. Okay, freely movable joint structures, so things we find in the joints or around the joints. First one is bursa, and y'all probably heard of bursitis before. But bursa is each synovial joint has a little sacrum, like I said, that has fluid in it, and there can be multiple bursa in one joint even. Y'all ever see anybody with bursitis? If they burst that sac or if it gets really inflamed, it'll well up and look like a balloon under their skin. It's so weird. And it's just like mushy because it's all fluid. It's kind of strange. Anyway, they say bursitis is very painful too. These are small capsules that hold synovial fluid. Like I said, it really cushions, and then it really separates tendons from bones to kind of provide to decrease friction.
What's that? What's wrong with your like tendons when especially hairdressers that hold their wrist like this for a long period of time to cut hair? They get
Carpal tunnel syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially people who use keyboards a lot.
What actually happens?
I think it just gets really inflamed and can be injured over time if they stay inflamed. So it has to do with the tendons. There's some tendon sheaths, which is the next thing on here, especially around all those tendons on the hand. If you've ever seen a picture of something with no skin on their hand or like a cadaver, there's like large tissue sheaths on their hands right here. I'll see if I can pull up a picture in a minute and show you, and those can get really inflamed. Tendon sheaths are double-layered synovial structures. It says surrounding tendons, again, to decrease friction, and they secrete synovial fluid. So they secrete more of that lubricating fluid to keep it from, keep the inflammation down and decrease that friction, because that's one thing that causes inflammation. Lots and lots in the wrists and the fingers. No, I'll try to show you all a picture. And then articular tissues, again, cushions to decrease wear. One example, articular fibrocartilage. Two examples of this. One is the meniscus. Probably heard of that in the knee. Specifically, it's like a disc, like a tissue. If you look on 139, it's a tissue of a hyaline cartilage, or fibrocartilage actually, between the femur and the tibia. Okay, it's like a little disc of cartilage in here. That's what it does. It's really good shock absorber. Also just works to prevent friction. So people with osteoarthritis, a lot of times what that means is that meniscus or the other cartilage in those areas has worn down. Okay, maybe the articular cartilage or the meniscus is worn down. Like my mom, I just saw an x-ray of her knees, and she's always had knee problems even in high school. And there's no separation on the inside between her bones. I mean, you can see where her bones are touching each other. There's no separation at all.
Mom's dad, he had both his knees replaced.
She needs to. So, and then the other one is the intervertebral disc, the fibrocartilage in between the vertebrae. That's another example of that fibrocartilage. So again, absorbs shock, tries to redistribute the force so that not any one area of those bones gets too much pressure. Tendons, we said tendons connect what? What are tendons connect? Muscle to bone.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, muscle to bones, tendons, and then I remember ligaments, bone a la bone. That's how I remember that. Bone a la bone, L for ligaments. You can remember it how you want to, but I still remember it that way. So, they're composed of collagen and elastic fibers. We know they're connective tissue, right? They have those two things in them. They'll return, normally they should return to their, so you stretch them out, they return to their original length. But if you injure it, okay, so if it's stretched, you know, your knee is stretched or your elbow or whatever is stretched, and then you get it injured, like it gets twisted or moved out of place, then it pulls in a way that it's not used to, and that's a way to injure it.
Completely tear it. I guess
Or you can tear it out.
like an ACL would be a ligament.
That's right. ACL,